The political storm at the White House intensified yesterday over the Rob Porter mess because the head of the FBI, Christopher Wray, testified on Capitol Hill with a very different account of the timeline of who knew what when in terms of the abuse allegations against Porter, the former White House staff secretary, by two of his ex-wives. Christopher Wray telling members of Congress that almost a year ago in March, the FBI made a partial report to the White House. Then there was a more definitive report over the summer, and the investigation was closed. Some follow-up information last November. In other words, months before the White House has acknowledged even knowing about these allegations, the head of the FBI now says that information was conveyed. But that's not mainly what I want to talk about today, because I have been so struck by the tone and the eloquence of accounts by women involved. You've got the two ex-wives of Rob Porter and then the ex-wife of a White House speechwriter who also was booted at the end of last year over abuse allegations. Both of these men, Rob Porter and David Sorensen, vehemently deny the allegations. But the thing about these women is, you know, they didn't mount some public campaign. They didn't try to torpedo Porter's White House job. What they did was they spoke to the FBI. They were approached during a background check. They didn't go public with that. It's only after the story exploded into public view that they have started to tell their stories, their side of what happened. And I think there's a moment here, a societal moment, for us to think about victims of domestic violence, alleged domestic violence, and how it looks to them. So in the case of Colby Holderness, you've undoubtedly seen the images of her, the photographs of her with a bruised face, with a black eye, talking about her ex-husband. She was the first ex-wife. She wrote a piece in the Washington Post yesterday, talked about, for me, living in constant fear of Rob's anger and being subjected to his degrading tirades for years chipped away at my independence and sense of self-worth. I walked away from that relationship, she says, a shell of the person I was when I went into it. But it took me a long time to realize the toll his behavior was taking on me. And again, the allegations may be disputed. The photograph certainly can't be disputed. Holderness goes on to say that it took strength for her to talk to family and friends and clergy and counselors and even, yes, the FBI about what had happened in her marriage. In other words, it's not over in terms of the damage inflicted the day you walk away from such a relationship. Then there's the just as serious issue of being believed and supported, she says, by those you choose to tell. Sometimes people don't believe you. Sometimes they have difficulty truly understanding what you are trying to tell them. Now, this other woman who was interviewed on the Today Show yesterday, her name is Jessica Corbett, again, the ex-wife of former White House speechwriter David Sorensen. And here are among the things that she said. There was a question, of course, the president invoked the issue of due process for those accused. And they are deserving of due process in a legal sense. Doesn't mean they're entitled to keep jobs at the White House in a political sense. And she said, well, her ex got due process when I answered the FBI agent truthfully. Corbett goes on to say on the Today Show that Sorensen had thrown her into a wall, had burned her with a cigarette. He made me drive around for hours, wondering where I would go with no money to beg people for cash so I could go home. He cut off my credit card. He drained my bank account, told me I would be homeless. And finally, she says that people accuse me of trying to bring a good man down, but all I did was tell the truth. I wasn't out to get him. I was not trying to get him denied this job by telling the truth. I do very much believe he's one of the best and most capable people at what he does professionally. Now, obviously, none of us can know the exact details of what happened in these marriages, and there is another side to the story. And all of these men, not just the men who worked at the White House, but others are entitled to the presumption of innocence, legally at least. But I think in speaking out, and obviously it is hard for these women, for other women, to sort of put themselves in that harsh media spotlight and talk about, you know, how not only, you know, the accounts of how they felt that they were treated very badly, but the damage it did to them. The fact that they stayed, why they didn't leave earlier, I mean, all the questions that are raised about this. I just think if we can put politics aside for just one moment, obviously the stories about the White House will continue after the FBI testimony, but I think it is helpful for us as a society to pause for a moment, to read what these women wrote or said on the air, and to think about the damage is done about a subject that until recent years wasn't talked about all that much in public, but now, because of the political spotlight, is very much coming out into the open.